you in the Ottoman Empire, and you just slept with a vizier. At dawn, before leaving, he looks around to make sure no one is watching. He takes off one of his rings and slips it onto your finger while you are still sleeping, leaving his embroidered handkerchief on your shoulder as well. That gesture seemed insignificant, but there was a hidden detail that could turn it into a huge problem. Because a ring like that, given in secret, was not a simple gift. It was a silent sign of having been chosen, which if it reached the wrong eyes, would arouse very dangerous suspicions. And if you added to that the fact that your former companions started seeing you wear better silks, move through reserved areas of the palace, or disappear some nights without explanations, the pieces started to fit too quickly. Because you were not born in the body you lived in within the harem, and that secret weighed more than any other. And that was the part that could really cost you your life, because as long as you pleased the vizier, he would protect you. But it was enough for you to disobey him just once for him, in a fit of rage, to point you out in front of everyone and reveal that deep down you were not the woman you pretended to be. And to those who deceived in this way, the court treated them as cursed creatures, children of the devil who had broken the sacred order of the body. What awaited them was not a simple execution, but something designed so that no one would ever forget their example. It was here when things started to get complicated. Because when someone so powerful began to protect you, a completely different game began. The game of disappearing in plain sight. You couldn't go from serving water to wearing jewelry overnight. The change had to be slow, almost invisible. At first, you continued with the same task, but you looked for excuses to be present at the gatherings, serve at the banquets, or accompany messages to the private rooms. Fortunately for you, the harem was already full of figures that didn't quite fit in as either men or women. The eunuchs, castrated as children, were the only ones allowed to move freely between the women and men of the palace, and for that reason, they had become completely trusted guardians and messengers. That habit worked in your favor, because in a world where someone like that could move everywhere without raising suspicion, you too could blur yourself among those boundaries. Little by little, your clothes improved. You moved through places where you were previously forbidden to enter, and you were getting closer and closer to their circle of trust. But there was the risk. If someone put all the pieces together too soon, the rumor could explode before your position was secured. And in an Ottoman court where special treatment already aroused envy, and where presenting yourself with a different gender than the one you were assigned was seen as an unforgivable deceit, the combination of both was a bomb too big. It was enough for the story to reach the wrong people, for them to drag you to the square and impale you in front of everyone. And to top off the humiliation, they smeared your genitals with honey so that the birds would come down to peck them off while you were still breathing until they ended your life, turning you into a warning for anyone who thought of imitating you. But the story had another side. If you were the vizier or even the sultan himself, the situation changed completely. In the Ottoman court, belonging to the elite meant having access to all kinds of luxuries and pleasures, no matter who they came from. In the private rooms, the baths, the enclosed gardens, the Kochek dancers offered much more than a show. And as long as your status was high, nobody questioned your preferences. But that friendly face was only for those in power. For the rest, the body that didn't fit in was paid for with blood, and the Ottoman Empire was neither the first nor the cruelest to impose it. Thousands of years before there was a sultan, a harem, or a single one of these laws, there was a time and a place where someone like you did not hide in the halls, but walked barefoot through the center of the temple, and no one dared to touch them. You are in Mesopotamia more than 4,000 years ago, a place where someone like you did not hide from anyone, because you were the right hand of a goddess. You are sacred, one of those people we would call transgender today, although that word doesn't exist yet and will not exist for millennia. Here, however, you have a different name, intermediary between worlds. Some of them were born male and voluntarily underwent ritual castration to better serve the goddess. Others simply lived as women since childhood, because Ishtar called them in a dream, or because the priests recognized a sign at birth. Whatever the path, the result was the same. They were the ones who conducted the most delicate rites, who sang the laments for the dead, who played the drums in the sacred processions. On the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, it appears written with surprising clarity. The goddess Ishtar had the power to turn a man into a woman, and a woman into a man, and those who lived in that crossing belonged to her. And that's why you eat in temples, sleep under roofs that others will never step on, and kings consult you before a war. You are a necessary part of the sacred machinery. But what is happening in Mesopotamia is the kindest memory that history will keep for millennia. Now imagine you are in Rome and have just undergone ritual castration using a shard of broken pottery. It's Blood Day, the Day of Blood. The music has carried you to a state you no longer recognize for hours. The Phrygian flutes play endlessly, the drums pound through your chest, and dozens of people around you are jumping, shouting, and covered in crimson. Everyone follows Cybele, the great mother brought from Anatolia, and her lover Attis, the young god who underwent ritual castration beneath a pine tree to devote himself to her completely. You have just taken part in the same ritual with a sharpened stone or a shard of pottery. In the midst of the frenzy, you have completed the ritual, and now, as crimson stains your robes, you lift the offering into the air, and it disappears into the crowd. If you recover from the ordeal, and many never do, you will become one of the Galli, priestesses of Cybele, dressed in yellow robes, heavy jewelry, with long dyed hair, and a high-pitched voice cultivated over the years. The Romans look at you with an uncomfortable mix of fascination and disdain in equal parts. Your cult is legal. The Great Mother officially entered Rome in the year 204 before Christ, invited by the Senate itself after consulting the Sibylline books. But at the same time, a Roman citizen is forbidden to become Galli. None. You can exist, but only if you come from outside, only if you are the others. And then there is the case that everyone whispers about, without daring to say it out loud. Emperor Heliogabalus ascended to the throne at 14 years of age, in the year 218 AD. And from day one, he did something that Rome had never seen before. He wore makeup, removed his body hair, and asked to be called Mom instead of Sir. He married men in public ceremonies and offered an immense fortune. It is said that he promised half of the empire to any doctor who could give him a woman's body. No doctor dared, and his own Praetorian Guard decided they had seen enough. In March of the year 222, at 18 years old, he was killed along with his mother. He was dragged naked through the streets of Rome. They tried to put his body through a sewer, and when it didn't fit, they threw him into the Tiber with a weights tied so that he wouldn't float back. That was the message. Here you can live on the edge, but if you get too close to power, being what you are, power returns you to the river. And while Rome was throwing its emperor into the waters, on the other side of the ocean, something even more brutal was brewing. In Tenochtitlan, they are removing your colon with their hands, and you are still not dead. You are in the Mexica Empire in the 15th century, and someone has discovered you. Maybe they saw you entering a house where you should not have been. Maybe someone recognized that you were wearing clothes that did not match your assigned gender. Maybe you just said too much. The Mexica Code on this does not allow for nuances. If you assumed a female role and had relationships with another man, the punishment was carried out in front of everyone. First, they tied you up, then they opened your belly from the lower part and extracted your entrails, paying special attention to the colon because the Mexicas saw this organ as the very symbol of dishonor. And when there was nothing left inside, they would light the pyre. They burned you alive, or what little was left of you, and scattered the ashes so that not even the gods could find you in the afterlife. And here is where the story takes one of its most cruel turns. Because when the Spanish arrived in 1519 and saw this system of punishment, they did not bring relief, they brought something worse. Vasco Núñez de Balboa, in the year 1513, in what is now Panama, encounters a group of transgender people at the court of Chief Quaraquá. His reaction is chillingly recorded by the chronicler Peter Martir d'Anguera. Balboa sets 40 of those people on his war dogs, alanos trained to tear apart. The animals shred them alive while the Spanish soldiers watch. And while in America the dogs did the dirty work, on the other side of the world, someone was about to change the rules of the game with a signature. You're born in India, in a small village, and at the age of 7, your family takes you to live with the Hijra. For centuries, that moment was not a tragedy. It was an offering to a respected, ancient community. with a recognized place in the social fabric. The Hijra already appear in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata, and in the Kama Sutra itself, where they are described as a third gender with the right to exist, marry, bless, and curse. During the Mughal Empire, between the 16th and 18th centuries, you reached a power that is hard to imagine today. You were advisors to kings. You guarded the imperial harems, because no one trusted anyone as much as they trusted you to allow you access to the emperor's wives and concubines. You managed treasures, recited poetry in the courts. Your blessing at a birth or wedding was paid with gold, and your curse could ruin an entire family. And then, in the year 1871, a British official signs a paper called the Criminal Tribes Act, and suddenly you stop being sacred and become criminals just for being born. The law does not accuse you of a specific crime. It declares you criminals by nature, by your very existence. The colonial police force you to register in special lists, ban you from appearing in public dressed as women under penalty of immediate arrest, take away the custody of the boys and girls you were raising, and the declared objective of the British government is written with surgical coldness in the archives: gradual extinction. In 2 decades, you went from being the guardians of the emperor to being hunted by the law, from earning gold for your blessings to hiding in alleys to avoid ending up in a cell. And this recipe of turning the revered into the hunted, the British were going to copy in every corner of the empire. You are on the plains of what is now New Mexico. It's 1886 and you've just been received at the White House as a diplomat of your people. Your name is Wee Waa. You are from the Zuni people, and you are the Mana, which anthropologists would later begin to call Two-Spirit, a person who carries both male and female spirits in one body. In dozens of Native American tribes, from the Lakota to the Navajo, including the Crow, the Cheyenne, and the Mojave, your role is sacred. You weave, cook, and participate in rituals that neither men nor women can lead. When someone dies, you're the one who washes the body. When a child is born, you're the one who recites the first words. And in 1886, the United States government, not fully understanding what you are, invites you to Washington as a representative of your people. You spend 6 months in the Capitol, dining with senators, meeting President Grover Cleveland, and everyone treats you like a distinguished lady, not knowing that in your community, you're neither a man nor a woman, but something that their categories cannot name. But your case is the exception, not the rule. Because 3 centuries earlier, when the first European conquerors arrived on the continent, the reaction was identical to Balboa's in Panama. The French chroniclers in the Great Lakes describe the Two-Spirit with disdain and call them berdaches, an insult taken from Persian. The English settlers hanged them, the Spanish burned them in public bonfires or throw them to the dogs. And the tribes, little by little, learn the lesson. To survive the gaze of the white man, they begin to hide their own sacred things, not to speak of them, to pretend they never existed. An entire spiritual category erased not out of conviction, but out of fear. And that fear had a concrete origin, a book and an idea that were about to change everything. Up until now, you could be killed for breaking social codes, for dishonoring your family, for offending a specific god. But now, for the first time in history, your way of dressing and existing has a name carved in stone, and that name is sin. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5, states it clearly without leaving room for interpretation. A woman shall not wear men's clothing, nor shall a man put on women's clothing. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. The revolutionary and terrible thing is that the punishment no longer ends when your life ends. Before, if you were executed in Tenochtitlan or drowned in a Germanic swamp, your suffering ended there. Not now. Now the damnation continues after death, in an eternal hell from which there is no escape, from which there is no possible redemption without public repentance, without humiliation, without renouncing who you are. Christianity takes that line from Leviticus and Deuteronomy and turns it into universal doctrine. Islam from the 7th century adds its own interpretations, and although in some Islamic courts, homoerotic poetry and fluid gender figures flourished for centuries, The letter of the law remained like a sword hanging from the ceiling, ready to fall when someone decided it was time. And that moment, in many places, did not arrive naturally. It arrived on a ship. Colonialism did something no religion had achieved on its own. It exported persecution on an industrial scale. In the year 1860, the British Empire introduced Section 377 of the Penal Code to India. The text is a short paragraph that criminalizes carnal relations against the order of nature, with penalties of up to 10 years of imprisonment, hard labor, and public flogging. This is the same India where the Hijra had been imperial advisors, where the Kama Sutra had clinically described desire between men as normal. And that Section 377 does not remain in India. It is copied word for word in every British colony: Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Sudan, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados. More than 40 countries inherit the same paragraph, written by a handful of Victorian officials who never set foot in those territories. And here's the most brutal irony of this whole story. Today, in the year 2024, most of those countries still keep that law. They defend it as if it were part of their tradition, as if it were theirs, when in reality it was brought over on a ship by men in white wigs who no longer exist. And when it seemed that the colonial system had already destroyed everything, in the very heart of Europe, a small building in Berlin was about to try something that no one had done before. You are in Berlin. It's May 6th, 1933, and you see hundreds of Nazi students kicking down the door of your house. That house is the Institute for Sexual Research, founded by the Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld in 1919. For 14 years, this building has been the most advanced place in the world for the study of gender identity and sexuality. The term transgender was first coined here. The first modern sex reassignment surgeries were performed here with Dora Richter in 1922 and Lily Elba in 1930 and 1931. Here, people who would have been imprisoned anywhere else in the world found doctors, therapists, and a special passport signed by the Berlin police, allowing them to dress according to their identity without being arrested. And on May 6th, the Nazis destroyed it. They break the shelves, tear down the paintings, and 4 days later, on the 10th of May, they take more than 20,000 books and files to the Opera Square and burn them in a bonfire. It is the famous book burning that cameras from all over the world recorded without entirely knowing what was being burned. Decades of research, medical records of thousands of people, photographs, letters, everything ashes. And then the worst begins. Transgender and gay people are sent to concentration camps. They sew the pink triangle onto the uniform, which in the camp's internal hierarchy was one of the worst, below the Jews' yellow triangle in many prisons. Subjected to experiments, forced castrations, and worked to death. Dora Richter, the first transgender woman in history to undergo surgery, disappears after the assault on the Institute. There's no record of her death, no grave, no archive. Simply, he is lost track of amidst the flames of May 1933 and is never heard from again. And when the war ends, when the world starts to rebuild, those survivors of the pink triangle receive no reparations. The law that had imprisoned them, paragraph 175, remains in effect in West Germany until 1969. Many return to prison, others spend the rest of their lives in silence. And now, right now, while you are reading this, the world map remains divided in two. In more than 60 countries, you can still go to prison for living your identity. In 10, the penalty is death, hanging, stoning, shooting. In many other cases, even if the law does not formally convict you, the street does. Losing your job, being kicked out of home, being unable to rent an apartment, not being able to open a bank account with your real name. And what's curious is that much of the persecution that trans people face today in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean does not come from ancient traditions. It comes from colonial laws imported 2 centuries ago, written by Victorian officials in cultures that, before the arrival of the colonizer, would have called sacred what they now persecute. Don't forget to support this type of content by subscribing and watching this other very interesting video that you will love.